All right, I want to talk a little bit about Arcane. I just saw the finale last night. Riot put on this big finale event at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, and it was super neat because they sold a bunch of tickets to fans, and so it was kind of this two-tiered situation where up in the top of the amphitheater, it's not an amphitheater, it's inside the theater, they had all the Riot people, a bunch of creators, a bunch of press and company partners and all that stuff. But the bottom floor of the theater were all fans, like very, very, very hardcore fans, because I think they only tweeted this out through like their Arcane social media. At least that's where I saw it. And so it's just like, it was crazy. And they did this big fan fest beforehand. There were tons of cosplayers, but just again, imagine like a couple thousand like super diehard League of Legends and Arcane fans. And it made the viewing experience super, super cool because, as I'll get to in a little bit, at a big moment, you had like the audience just going crazy and shrieking. It was above and beyond sort of the opening nights of a big blockbuster movie comes out and everybody rushes to go see. Like the theater has that energy where everybody's like amped and the reactions are just really big and all that stuff. It was like that, but on another level. So I want to share all of that to color the thoughts that I'm going to share on Arcane as I reflect on the finale, season 2, and then even just Arcane as a project and what it means for Riot Games. But I know you might see that I'm just doing this kind of ad prompt in my office, but don't worry, because Travis in the fancy setup is here to give you our sponsor information. Did you know that the median salary for back-end web developers in 2023 was over $100,000? That's right, programmers have amazing earning potential, and now you can learn skills and become a programmer with today's sponsor, Boot.dev. It's been so cool. I've actually heard from many of you, including some friends of mine, and people have been really happy and satisfied with the product. I think part of the reason they've enjoyed it so much is because the smartest way to learn to code is to make sure that you're never bored, and Boot.dev is online, self-paced, and it feels like a captivating RPG game. The platform is designed to get you writing a ton of code because getting your hands on the keyboard and shipping projects is the only way to really learn, and you can learn back-end web development from start to finish with Boot.dev in the Python and Go programming languages. While using Boot.dev, you can earn XP, levels, achievements, and even complete quests to earn top spots on the global leaderboard. They also know that not everyone has the means to pay for membership, so I think it's so cool that all their content is free to read and watch in guest mode, and paid membership is actually what unlocks interactivity and the game that goes completely with it. Click my link in the description box below and use the code to save 25% off your first month, or even the entire cost of an annual plan if that's what you choose to go for. Thank you so much to Boot.dev for sponsoring this video. Thank you, Fancy Travis. Okay, so what did I think of Arcane? I really liked it. I was really worried during the second act of season 2 because I felt like I see so many shows these days do this thing where they have to rush to the finish line because, you often hear rumors of, oh, this was supposed to be like a 12-episode season and then it ended up being 10, or you just have all this initial setup. As we have condensed television programming down and down and down and down, it just means that like so much stuff has to happen in the end that you often end up in so many of those moments where you have characters that feel like they're teleporting across like a big world to get to every place they need to go to really quickly. You have characters that don't get acknowledged because they have sort of written themselves into a corner and they don't have very much time. And I was worried that that would happen with season 2 of Arcane. And I will admit that it kind of, in episode 9, there were definitely some things where they're like, fuck, we gotta get this done, we gotta get this done. And so I would have liked a little bit of a moment to stay on things. But overall, I was really impressed, especially because when episode 7 started and I realized it was like a bottle episode where we're not even spending any time with the main plot points that occurred in Act 2, I was like, oh God, they have 2 episodes to like bring everything together. And for the most part, I think they did a pretty good job of it. Episode 7 might end up being my favorite episode of season 2. I need to decide how it compares to some of my favorites in season 1 before I say it's my favorite of the whole show. But I really liked that we got to sit with these couple of different characters. Echo had been in the background for a long time of the show, and has sort of been like a side character. And I really enjoyed that they were able to bring him to the forefront, even though he's not necessarily one of my favorite characters or anything. I just felt like he hadn't gotten a lot of screen time, and the way they spent time with him, I think, was really impactful. And that episode, even though it was Powder versus Jinx in terms of who you're experiencing, I felt as though it did such a good job of redeeming Jinx while not even really pitting her on screen in a meaningful way. And what I mean by that is, like, if you have played League of Legends for the last, I don't know, 14, 13 years, how long has Jinx been in the game? You have sort of impression of Jinx as this type of character who is this crazy, like Harley Quinn-esque, just wants to destroy everything, has no humanity person. And when season 1 hit, you got to learn a little bit about how she became that person, but it became really easy, especially after the end of season 1, to sort of be like, yeah, there's not like a redeemable version of this character. She killed Caitlyn's mother. She is just, psychotic. Like, there's just no way for her to become a better person. And you started to get a little bit of her humanity with Isha, but once she dies, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The name is not said that often, I feel like, in the show. But once Isha dies at the end of Act 2, you once again revert to the idea, at least for me, I was like, oh, okay, they're going to make her unredeemable because here was her opportunity for humanity and she failed it. But in spending an entire episode and sort of falling in love with this really remarkable, like, thoughtful person who mourns the death of her sister and who is smart and who has these like genuine romantic feelings with Echo, you start to become, it really sets you up, I think, in episode 8 and especially in episode 9 to feel as though this character is a hero, right? If only a couple things had gone different, she would be like this lovable character that everyone would root for as they ship her and Echo together in this alternate timeline. And so I thought doing that was really great. It took me a little bit to understand why. I guess it took not that long, but it did take a little bit to understand like the Heimerdinger sacrifice, because I have to keep my voice down because Kobe hasn't watched it yet. He's in the other room. To understand the Heimerdinger sacrifice, because I was not entirely clear. Like, there's just like it clips over and you just see a little thing fly off and you're like, there's no moment where they're like, or this is going to go really bad. And then Heimerdinger just kind of walks out and is like, peace. No. And then he's gone. Hard to imagine that character is actually dead, since they did not show any, it wasn't like he was laying on the ground like Bert or whatever. And Powder wasn't crying over his corpse or anything like that. So I assume he is set up for them to do something else with in the future. But yeah, I just thought overall that like, that was such a really, really cool episode. And I think, somebody told me that they feel as though Arcane is often at its best when you have these slower paced episodes. And I can understand that in terms of sort of the artistic moments of the show are best showcased there. And I think like if you want to talk about how Arcane is a good show, those are probably the episodes that are best to point to. Animation is just beautiful, of course, and there's just so much stuff that was really, really good about it. And so then we get into the next 2 episodes. And I'll be honest, episode 8 is kind of like a blur to me because it almost suffers from, I don't even think it's a bad episode. I think it's good, but it kind of suffers from middle book syndrome. People often talk about this especially in fantasy, where the middle of something, a middle of a 3-part thing is often like the weirdest or least rewarding, I guess, to read, because you have like the setup and then you have like the big finale, but the middle part just has to like bridge everything together. And you actually see, in my opinion, that so often in Arcane, where Act 2, I think of both Season 1 and Season 2, are the weakest acts, and oftentimes the middle episode in each of these acts are often struggling too. And I think episode 8 did not struggle, but it's hard because I think whenever everybody thinks about Act 3, they're going to think about episode 7 and they're going to think about episode 9. Episode 8, really cool. I mean, one of the big highlights for me was Mel. I was not sure what to think of Mel in season 1, especially before like the end, because she was kind of typecast. I don't want to say typecast. She was cast as this manipulative, sketchy person. You're like, oh, is this somebody I'm supposed to be invested in? Or like, it's just a matter of time before she betrays our heroes. And she ended up, I just realized I didn't even talk about Jason in episode 7, which is how, yeah, whatever. We'll get back to that. Speaking of Jason, Mel, I think Mel, I was not sure if she would be able to stand her own as her own character, but I think starting in season 2, you started to really see an example of that. I think one thing I definitely want to call out is I just think her design as a character is so cool. This character is like absolutely beautiful. She's animated amazingly. Like it, to the extent that I saw some people cosplaying her and they just like crush the cosplays at the event. And even though the fan fest thing I was at last night, and even though Jinx and Vi and all these characters are characters that I have known for so many years, played in game, just had all this affinity to, like the Mel cosplayers were the ones that I think really stood out to me because her design is just so cool. And I don't know, I just really like how they created her in the world. But I really liked her sort of ascension. You know, I am a sucker for those who, I noticed the Brandon Sanderson sweater that I threw on for this. I'm a sucker for really big hero moments. Like it is, I think in so many different things, I just really like these like climactic, explosive moments where you get the huge payoff for everything that you've been investing in. And I think with Mel in episode 8, it felt really good, even though I think they had, you know, the show might have been better. I would argue, and we'll talk about this later, the show would have been better if both seasons had been either 10 or 11 or 12 episodes. But I think part of that is like you would have had more time to develop this. Like I actually think that if there's a chance, and I could be wrong here, but I think there's a very good chance that if you cut together only the Mel segments to sort of tell her story, where like it's only the parts where she's on screen or being talked about, it would feel very rushed or very sudden. She's kind of like teleports in, she sees her brother, she's like, I can see some sort of pattern, and then she just kind of is confronted and explodes and is like, I'm a superhero now. But it's still so cool when she does become that, and I really want to play her in game now, which is a huge success for Riot Games because I assume that she's an upcoming champion. I'd be surprised if she wasn't the next one, though I should say I don't know anything. So I really liked that about her. I know this video is very random. We're going to go back to Jason in episode 7 because I completely forgot about him, which I think tells the story of how rewarding the Echo and Powder stuff is at episode 7, where like that's where my brain goes. It's funny because Jace like says so little in episode 7. You know, he's literally just like climbing. They have to show his like path to understanding how fucked everything got, and so you have to spend all this time with him. But really, like, there's not much character development there. There's not much going on. You're just sort of like, okay, he builds himself a little, what are those things called for his leg? Somebody has, I don't know. You know what it is, a brace. And then he climbs to the top, which I thought was very, very visually well, you know, the break through the clouds and all that stuff. And then seeing the version of himself with the hammer, I thought was so cool. And I love the fact that it switches to that hammer as he goes away. So I thought that was really, really rewarding. Jace, in my opinion, plays a very minor, I shouldn't say minor role, because obviously he does a lot of big stuff. But he, as opposed to season 1, I think really takes a backseat in season 2, which is interesting because I think in season 1 he was probably the most controversial character in terms of people trying to decide if he was like a hero or if he was like villainous or whatever. And so it's fascinating to me that he is like such a front face for the show. I think is, I don't know, maybe I need to go rewatch Act 1, but I feel like honestly Mel is more prominent in the show, and so is Echo maybe even, than Jace in season 2, even though like the 4 that they use for all the marketing and that they position as like the main characters, the main characters of the show are obviously Jinx, Vi, Victor, and Jace, with maybe like a little bit of Caitlyn up there too. But like honestly, of our main lineup, Jace is like not seen as much in season 2, which I find fascinating. So yeah, we have episode 8. Is episode 8 when we have the sex scene? So I'll tell you all that. Okay, this is what I was going to talk about. That was really funny. as I said before, the audience was just electric, to the extent that in the beginning of episode 7, as everybody's watching it for the first time, and it's like the first thing that we're seeing in the theater, as we move into Act 3, you have, like, anytime a new character shows up on screen for the first 10 minutes, I shouldn't say new character, an established character shows up that people are excited about, like even down to Vander and all these characters and Silco, the audience just screams, to the extent that it was distracting almost. I was like, please, I hope this doesn't continue. Like, it was fun for the first couple minutes, but now we're moving into the show and it's getting distracting. But eventually it settled into a pretty good balance. But the funniest thing in the world was during the Vi and Caitlyn sex scene. The audience is just shrieking and cheering at every single moment, because that was a very extended scene, right? Not extended in the sense that you don't really see much. There's definitely the fade to black, but like you see what they did very well, I think, was they kept giving you the moment where you think they would fade to black, and then they show like another thing, right? Like, oh, kissing, okay, is this a fade to black? Oh no, okay, now we're like hand stuff, okay, now we're gonna fade to black. No, oh, now we're taking our clothes. And every one of those beats, the audience would cheer. And so it's an experience that I will probably never have the rest of my life, where I'm in a massive theater where people are cheering actively at every stage of the build up into actual intercourse. It was so funny. And it's great too, because of the way that the audience was bifurcated, where you had the fans in the lower bowl and you had the upper terrace being all these like executives and creators and all this stuff. You know, the fans are going crazy, and then the audience, the people upstairs, are just like, oh, whoa, like, not necessarily for the sex scene, but just the hilarity of the situation. So I just thought that was really funny, and such a strange way to experience that scene. But I thought that was really cool. I mean, I respect them a lot for putting that in. Obviously, we had a sex scene in episode 1 or season 1, which is the like Hextech orgasm is what I call it, because of the way that they were juxtapositioning Victor's Hextech stuff with the Mel Jace sex scene. But I know a lot of people were worried that they would never show overt sexuality between two women characters because of how global the game is, and I assume that scene is probably not available in every market in which the show is released, but I just respect the fact that they like went for it, and it felt like it was a pretty cool build up. And I know some people are like, yo, it's so cool that it happened in the prison, which is like, you know, they first met in a prison. But also I know some people are like, it's just kind of random, where they're like, oh, Jinx has fled, and they're just like, and now we'll have sex in a jail cell. But I don't know, it's probably enough of me talking about a sex scene. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was all pretty cool. It was funny too, because I was, oh god, what is the name of the secondary Caitlyn love interest that betrays them? I'm just Googling it right now so that I can find it. But as even Google's not able to find it. I know she's in TFT, which is kind of awkward. But so I thought that it was interesting, because as all that stuff is going down, I'm like, this is, oh, Maddie is her name. As all that stuff was going down, I was like, oh, it's kind of awkward, because I don't feel like she officially ended stuff with Maddie, even though like there was a moment where she like pulls her hand back or whatever. Maybe she finished off screen, but it's like, I wonder, it's kind of weird for them to just kind of dismiss that. And then we get into episode 9, and it's revealed to us that Maddie is actually a traitor and informing, and you're like, oh, actually, who cares at this point in time? And I think it's very funny and very smart of them, because they, first off, the weird thing about Maddie was, like, when I first saw her, I thought she was like a 16-year-old or 15-year-old whenever she's like on the team. And I remember actively thinking, because of the way she appeared, that, and like also I think just the fact that she's had this like nervous energy and demeanor about her, that I was like, in the earlier part of season 2, I was like, oh, it's so weird that they have this like kid around with them who's like obviously so like fangirly of Caitlyn. And then as the second act started, I was like, oh, okay, no, I guess she is an adult. So this is kind of a funny situation where they did a good job. By the way, I just remembered I have this little Mel pony that they sent me. I guess the lighting doesn't show up very well for it, but I guess they did a pretty good job of making people start to dislike her because they had a lot of loyalty to Vi, and so whenever she shows up behind Caitlyn in the bed, you're predisposed to be like, I don't know how I feel about this person. And so when she becomes traitorous, it actually feels almost kind of vindicating to people's emotions, because they're like, oh, I didn't like that jerk to begin with. She was moving in on my ship, and now I'm vindicated in disliking her. I really liked episode 9. So talking about episode 9, I really liked episode 9. I understand why it is contentious, because I think in particular it will likely feel contentious to people who are not like League of Legends players. Episode 9, I don't want to call it fan service because I think that implies that it is not the right move, but episode 9 definitely veers the most into sort of superhero, like moments, where you finally get to see all of our characters become like their ultimate version of their champion identity, I guess is the best way to put it, right? Where now all the gloves are off, except for Vice, I guess, and everybody is ready to go all in and fight each other, and you have these sick moments where, like, and again, oh my gosh, being in the theater with all these people was so cool, because suddenly you hear like the Jinx music, and it was like chills. She's about to come in and like save the day, and you're like, they do such a good job of moving so quickly in the fight scenes that you oftentimes, for me, I often in movies will be like, oh, where's this character going to show up? But I was so enthralled with everything that I was watching on a moment-to-moment basis that I never was thinking like, oh yeah, where's Jinx? But Jinx shows up in the balloon, Echo pops out, you're like, yes! It feels particularly good after episode 7 to see those two characters together doing things. You see like Echo with his time rewind abilities now. It just feels incredibly rewarding, I think, for people like myself who have played the game for so long and have invested energy into the IP in different ways, to see this huge dramatic payoff for so many of our characters and getting to see them in this really impactful way. And obviously there were moments of that even back in season 1, like the Echo Jinx fight on the bridge. But I just, in particular, I felt like that was really cool. Now, the reason why I say it's going to be probably difficult for other people is if you are just a casual fan of Arcane and you've maybe never played League of Legends, and your friends, or I don't know, some buzz that you saw online got you to watch season 1 and you're really excited about season 2. I think it is, and you got into it because you like episodes like episode 7. Episode 9 will probably be the toughest for you to get through, because not the toughest, but very tough for you to get through in the same sort of happy-go-lucky way, because they spend so much time on these sort of fan-based celebration moments of the characters that, if you are somebody who doesn't like Marvel films, for instance, you are probably going to be like, no, what have they done to my artful representation of the struggles between different humans and different groups and class warfare and all this stuff? They've just invaded it with explosions and unrealistic moments like the balloon crashing into the side of a building and everyone being just physically fine. I liked a lot of the moments with Mel. Like, actually, I'm just gonna say it. Like, I liked every moment where a character was doing something that felt heroic. And I don't even just mean like heroic in the, like, I don't know, traditional ancient sense, but also heroic in the like superhero type thing. Like, it just felt super cool to see like the shield come up and bounce back to the bullet back to Maddie, and to see like that fight between Mbessa and Caitlyn and Mel. The Warwick stuff is one of the few things where I feel as though if you are a League of Legends fan, you probably are more dissatisfied with the arc of the Vander. It's like, it's weird because it's not even, I think that for the sake of the show, they sacrificed the fan expectation around what Warwick is and how he works, especially in the final act. And I can understand why I feel like, a Warwick fan or a Warwick main, you're like, oh no, this did not work out the way that I wanted to. He becomes this weird, like, sculpture-esque thing, with his arms outstretched as he's holding both Jinx and Vi, and I could understand why that's a little weird. I do think episode 9, especially from talking to some friends who I think did a good job of pointing out some of the issues with it that did not feel as insistent to me whenever I'm sitting in a theater with a ton of people who are just cheering every moment that's happening on screen, is the convenience factor, where you have a lot of moments where things are somewhat unexplained but occur for dramatic tension. So for instance, why did Jinx show up like right after Caitlyn was going to die? Why wasn't she there from the beginning? Why wasn't Jace able to start shutting down the anomaly before, like, he's like the night before he's planning, it's like, you guys need to give me time to shut down the anomaly and all this stuff, and there's no explanation necessarily for like why he has to wait until everyone shows up to do that type of thing. And so I understand how people who are struggling to kind of live in the moment or to analyze why certain things are happening will struggle with episode 9, and I get it. And that's the type of thing where, again, I do feel like the show would have benefited from more episodes. And I remember feeling that way in episode or season 1 too. I remember there was some rumor that originally it was supposed to be like 10 episodes and they cut it down to 9. And you hear that again all the time with these types of shows. And so, yeah, I just feel like things happen very, very quickly. And while they pulled it off way better than what my expectations were, I do think like you miss a lot of the softer, quieter moments that the show makes, that it succeeds so well in episodes like episode 7. You miss a lot of those in episode 8 and 9, even at the end of 9, where, yeah, there just would have been nice to have some more quiet moments, especially after things end. In terms of the Victor J stuff, really liked it. Enjoyed the sort of, for years I've always thought that it was Rise who gave Jace the rune or the arcane crystal stuff for the wristband. The fact that it was Victor, I think, is really cool. The fact that, I in episode 7, I thought it might have been Victor that was like leading Jace around, especially because it's like, oh, it's a dude with a staff and a cloak, like very Victor-esque based off of what we've seen of him recently. But I still thought it was like a really cool payoff. The sort of visuals and all that stuff were really, really well done. I mean, obviously you can't say enough good stuff about the animation and the visuals and the art in the series. But yeah, really enjoyed all that stuff. And just overall felt really good about the end of the show. It's a bittersweet thing for me because while I know Mark and others are out there being like, hey y'all, it's the end of Arcane, but it's not the end of our time spending, moments in this world. And for me, I remain very skeptical that we will get a Arcane-esque show again, because the show's very impractical from a Riot perspective, right? Like, they spent so much money on this show, and I really, really appreciate that they did, and they spent so much time on it, and I really, really appreciate that they did, but I don't think that that is sustainable for them, right? Like, I don't think that they can spend so much money, so much time to release 9 episodes once every 3 years. And so my expectation is that they will try to do things on a lower scale in the future, which could still end up being really cool, but it will never feel as like grand. My expectation is that it will never feel as grand as what we saw with Arcane. And I think that is fine, and I understand the realities of it, but what it really does do is make me appreciate the show for what it is. I've been thinking since last night about writing something, which is very funny because I don't really write often. I prefer to do these types of videos and sort of talking head type things. But I think it would be difficult for me in a video to convey the reflection that I have internally on Arcane after having finished it, because there's so many things that are all kind of tied together for me. Like, one, at a macro level, it's just interesting because we live in this world where every IP and brand is just milked to oblivion, right? Like, every company is just trying to wring as much as they can out of anything that is remotely successful. And them ending the show after season 2, whether because of practical business reasons or because of from a narrative perspective, like they felt like they could wrap it up after season 2 and they didn't want to like beleaguer it or whatever. I don't know which one of those is true. I know which one they said publicly, but that just happens so infrequently these days, right? Normally something keeps going until it's not good anymore, or until like the profit is just not there, or until they've created like a million different spin-offs. And so it is very cool for me to see something that's so self-contained and something that really feels like just a creative endeavor for the sake of creative endeavors. On a personal level, it is really cool for me as a person who has spent his virtually entire adult life in the League of Legends world to see something that is so high caliber and so outstanding exist within the space. I definitely felt a lot of this in season 1, where it's just like, oh, here's this like thing that I can just recommend to virtually anyone, in terms of, hey, this is a really good show, you're just gonna like it. And it involves a lot of the world in which so much of my life is connected. So that felt really cool. And I think especially the way that I feel like season 2 is pretty good, and the way it's now like a contained, complete thing, it feels really great for me personally as a fan of this world and as somebody who's invested so much into it. And then on another level, like, I've known Christian Link and Alex Yee for 15 years now, coming up on 15, maybe 14. And I'm not going to pretend that like we all go out and get drinks every week or anything like that, but like, I remember when Christian was just doing music for the login screens, and people would get super excited about like, what's the song that's going to play on the login screen for this champion release? Oh, he really did such a good job with it. Or like, this Amumu music video is like really cool for a character that just seems, difficult to connect with otherwise. And I remember when Alex Yee was writing the Journal of Justice and using, having all these like sarcastic, sardonic voices for his articles talking about what the world was and all that type of thing. And so it is neat to see people who have just been talented and passionate be put into a position of leadership to create something that is beautiful and wonderful in a world where companies, I think, are so risk adverse that all they want to do is install established figures to create things that, again, just sort of milk an IP. And so, I think for most companies that aren't Riot, what they would have done instead is like hire some idiot who doesn't really know or care about League of Legends to write something that does not resonate with the passion of the audience and does not feel like a League of Legends. And instead, Riot, for the many faults that I often cover, I think is just a singular company and game publisher for their ability to create something like Arcane. Not from the position of, hey, let's do this for some huge paycheck and let's license it out to some company out there like Lionsgate or whatever, but instead let's do this internally, and like, let's spend all the money that it's going to take to do this, and let's fail and get better and like learn how to do this. And I think oftentimes that part of Riot, that desire to like just fuck it, we'll do it ourselves attitude, can be pretty detrimental, and oftentimes for business partners, for fans, etc. But in this situation, especially because it's such a creative endeavor, I think it is really remarkable, and I really respect what they did, and I'm excited for what Christian and Alex both do, because I think they're remarkable individuals who clearly have demonstrated that they can like treat an IP like League of Legends with complete respect. So hopefully they stick around and they do more. All right, I understand why after 9 years of them at this company working on this project, they might be ready to take a break and then maybe go do something else that is not Riot Games, especially, as the company clamps down on budgets and headcount and all that type of stuff. But maybe I'm wrong, and they will stick around and they'll create something that is remarkable and it's grand and incredible with Fortiche as Arcane was, and it'll be set in Ionia, and you will be like, wow, this is incredible. We're learning so much, and Noxus continues to be a threat, and oh, look, there's Swain. But I don't know. It's ironic that for so long I was very skeptical that this company could do anything remotely cohesive with their lore. Then they come out and do all this stuff, and I'm like, this was amazing. Of course you can do this. And yet I'm like, but I don't think you'll do it again. I don't know. Either way, thank you for listening to my very long, extended rant about Arcane. What are your thoughts? I know, I'm disappointed that so many people do really want to like shit on season 2. I say so many. I haven't even. I've just seen some of that sentiment on Reddit, so I don't know what the general consensus yet is. I guess we'll wait a couple days before people decide. Like, oh, was the ending of season 2 really good, or was it contrived? I don't know, but I really liked it, and I might write something about this. And yeah, thanks for watching, and catch you later.